Myths are returning, legends are breaking, heroes, monsters, and survivors are facing the cost of everything they once believed. From ancient epics to modern franchises, the next era of cinema isn't about victory, it's about consequence. These films aren't just sequels, reboots, or adaptations, they are reflections of power, legacy, survival, and what remains after the world changes. Here are the stories that will define the future of cinema, not by spectacle alone, but by what they dare to confront. Long before it became a cinematic undertaking, the Odyssey existed as one of the most enduring pillars of human storytelling. Composed nearly 3,000 years ago and traditionally attributed to the ancient Greek poet Homer, the epic has survived wars, empires, and civilizations precisely because it is not about spectacle alone, but about endurance, identity, and the cost of survival. Its influence can be traced through literature, theater, and modern cinema, shaping the ways journeys, heroes, and homecoming narratives are told across cultures. At its core, the Odyssey follows Odysseus, king of Ithaca, in the aftermath of the Trojan War. Though victorious, he is denied peace. What should be a straightforward return home stretches into a decade-long ordeal, marked by divine interference, moral tests, and encounters that blur the line between myth and psychological trial. Monsters, temptations, and hostile gods are not merely obstacles, but reflections of the choices Odysseus must survive to remain himself. Intelligence, restraint, and memory become his weapons in a world where brute force repeatedly fails. The upcoming film adaptation, directed by Christopher Nolan and scheduled for theatrical release on July 17, 2026, represents one of the most ambitious modern interpretations of the epic. Nolan's involvement signals a deliberate emphasis on scale grounded in human perspective. Known for treating time, perception, and consequence as narrative forces, he approaches the Odyssey not as fantasy spectacle, but as a story about displacement and transformation. The film stars Matt Damon as Odysseus, with Anne Hathaway as Penelope and Tom Holland as Telemachus. By the time Dune Part 3 arrives, Paul Atreides' transformation from heir to emperor will have already reshaped the Imperium. Following the events of Dune Part 2, 2024, the story is expected to move beyond conquest and prophecy into the unsettling territory of power maintained. Widely understood to adapt elements of Frank Herbert's Dune Messiah, 1969, this next chapter will explore the consequences of leadership, the cost of fanatic devotion, and the burden of prescience, even if studio confirmation of the film's official title or release date has not yet been announced. Director Denis Villeneuve, who has emphasized that his Dune films form a cohesive vision, is expected to conclude Paul's cinematic journey with a narrative that is structurally more intimate and thematically darker. With Paul now ruling an empire reshaped by a holy war carried out in his name, the story interrogates what it means to be a savior whose decisions have catastrophic and irreversible consequences. The Fremen Jihad has spread across the Imperium, leaving Paul imprisoned by his visions, even as he holds supreme authority. Leadership in this universe is isolating and morally complex, far removed from conventional heroism. Returning cast members are anticipated to anchor the narrative continuity, while Villeneuve has signaled that this installment will emphasize quiet intensity and moral gravity rather than spectacle alone. The focus is expected to remain on the human and political dimensions of the saga, examining the cost of belief when myth becomes law. Rather than celebrating conquest, Dune Part 3 promises to confront the after-effects of destiny fulfilled, forcing both characters and audiences to wrestle with the consequences of power, the fragility of freedom, and the danger inherent in creating a legend whose reach extends far beyond the individual who bore it. Following the global success of Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire 2024, Legendary's MonsterVerse is preparing its next cinematic chapter, currently scheduled for March 26, 2027. While the subtitle, The Supernova, has circulated in fan discussions and trade speculation, it has not been officially confirmed by Warner Bros. Or Legendary. What is confirmed is that the franchise will continue to explore the shared universe of Titans, where these colossal beings reshape the natural and human worlds alike. This next installment continues the story of Godzilla and Kong, whose uneasy alliance has already redefined the balance between the surface world and Hollow Earth. Rather than focusing solely on rivalry, the sequel is expected to examine the consequences of coexistence in a planet where Titans are no longer myths, but active destabilizing forces. Humanity's role has shifted from dominator to observer and adapter, with governments, scientists, and citizens navigating challenges far beyond conventional understanding. The film is directed by Grant Sputor, with a screenplay by Dave Callaham, signaling a possible tonal evolution for the franchise. Legendary has indicated that the story will deepen the emotional and mythological scope of the monsterverse while maintaining the grounded human perspectives that have anchored previous entries. Godzilla and Kong are portrayed not merely as protectors or destroyers, but as ancient forces whose presence demands reconsideration of survival, balance, and power. Set against a backdrop of increasingly global instability, the narrative is expected to confront the consequences of relying on Titans as guardians. The very creatures that once saved humanity now embody both awe and risk, challenging the assumption that colossal power can be safely contained. Crime 101 enters the crime thriller landscape as a story of precision, philosophy, and calculated risk. While full production details and release dates have not been officially confirmed, the project is positioned as a grounded, character-driven exploration of modern criminal operations. Inspired by the novella by Don Winslow, the narrative is expected to focus on the meticulous planning, discipline, and systemic thinking that distinguish high-level crime from impulsive violence. Set in Southern California, the story follows a master thief and a seasoned detective whose opposing approaches highlight a central tension. One operates through control, preparation, and adherence to rules, while the other relies on instinct, experience, and persistence. Their conflict is not defined by personal vendetta, but by philosophy, the pursuit of order versus the navigation of chaos. Within this framework, crimes are presented less as spectacles and more as the unfolding of consequences when even the smallest deviation can trigger cascading failure. The title, Crime 101, reflects a core theme: the unspoken rules that govern professional theft and survival. Success is not about bravado or flash, but about restraint, foresight, and understanding the environment. The film is expected to explore how rigid systems respond under pressure and how control, once assumed, can become fragile when confronted by unexpected variables. While plot specifics, cast, and a confirmed release remain pending, Crime 101 is anticipated to emphasize tension derived from observation, strategy, and consequence rather than action set pieces. Its focus is on the narrowing margin between order and collapse, asking what happens when the systems designed to prevent failure begin to fail themselves. In doing so, the film promises suspense grounded in the inevitability of human error, making survival, both legal and criminal, a matter of discipline, timing, and philosophy rather than chance. The Wrecking Crew positions itself as a modern action film built less on excess and more on contrast. Announced by Amazon MGM Studios, the project brings together Dave Bautista and Jason Momoa in leading roles, pairing two physically imposing screen presences whose previous work has emphasized radically different styles of performance. Rather than presenting them as interchangeable action figures, the film is structured around tension born from personality, method, and conflicting approaches to violence. Directed by Angel Manuel Soto, whose recent work has blended grounded emotion with large-scale spectacle, The Wrecking Crew is framed as a character-driven action thriller rather than a traditional buddy spectacle. While official plot details remain limited, the film is confirmed to center on two elite operatives forced into an uneasy partnership, navigating a criminal underworld where loyalty is temporary and power structures shift without warning. The title itself suggests destruction, not as chaos, but as a calculated tool, a force applied when negotiation fails and restraint is no longer an option. What distinguishes The Wrecking Crew from similar genre entries is its emphasis on friction. Bautista and Momoa are not positioned as mirror images, but as opposing forces whose collaboration is rooted in necessity rather than trust. Their dynamic reflects a larger thematic concern: what happens when strength alone is no longer enough, and survival depends on adaptability, compromise, and the willingness to accept methods one fundamentally disagrees with. Produced under the Amazon MGM banner, the film reflects the studio's continued push into mid to high-budget action projects aimed at theatrical and global audiences. Soto's involvement suggests an effort to balance physical scale with character perspective, grounding the violence in consequence rather than spectacle. Action is treated as outcome, not identity. The Wrecking Crew is not about domination or heroism, it is about controlled destruction in systems already collapsing, and the cost of relying on force as the final solution. In a world where order is temporary and alliances are fragile, the film asks whether power can ever be wielded cleanly, or if every act of control leaves something irreparably broken behind. With Scream 7, the long-running horror franchise returns for another chapter of self-examination, continuing its tradition of reflecting not just on slasher films, but on its own evolving legacy. Since its debut in 1996, Scream has navigated generational change and shifting audience expectations by treating self-awareness as both a storytelling device and a source of suspense. This seventh installment is positioned not as a nostalgic reset, but as a continuation that examines survival, memory, and consequence in a world where familiarity itself can be dangerous. Official reports list the film for theatrical release on February 27, 2026, distributed by Paramount Pictures. While details about the director are not yet confirmed, the franchise's original creator, Kevin Williamson, remains involved in development. Neve Campbell is widely reported to return as Sidney Prescott, recentering the narrative around one of modern horror's most enduring figures, though final cast confirmations remain pending. This installment is expected to bridge past and present, exploring how legacy, trauma, and myth-making continue to shape characters and audience expectations alike. The ghost-faced identity, as in previous entries, serves less as a fixed villain than as a symptom of a cycle, a system driven by attention, obsession, and imitation. Violence in Scream 7 is likely to remain tied to narrative and emotional consequence, with tension arising not from spectacle alone, but from the human decisions that perpetuate fear. The film is designed to interrogate survival in a universe where rules constantly shift and no one is guaranteed safety, emphasizing strategy, intuition, and the enduring stakes of legacy. More than a standard slasher, Scream 7 aims to reflect on horror as a cultural construct, examining how franchises evolve, how fans participate in myth-making, and what it means to survive in a world built on repetition. It continues the series' defining tradition, suspense rooted in consequence, identity, and the haunting question of whether self-awareness is ever enough to keep anyone safe. The death of Robin Hood approaches one of folklore's most enduring legends from an angle rarely explored, not the rise of the outlaw, but the reckoning that follows a lifetime of myth. Announced as a grounded, revisionist take on the classic English tale, the film re-examines Robin Hood not as an untouchable symbol of rebellion, but as a man shaped and ultimately worn down by violence, consequence, and time. The film is directed and written by Michael Sarnowski, whose previous work demonstrated a precise control of tone and character-driven storytelling. The Death of Robin Hood stars Hugh Jackman in the title role, with Jodie Comer co-starring, marking a deliberate departure from youthful, romanticized interpretations of the character. This version of Robin Hood is no longer defined by daring thefts or heroic bravado, but by survival in the aftermath of legend. The forest myths have faded, and the cost of outlaw life has begun to surface. Rather than retelling familiar exploits, the narrative centers on an aging Robin Hood confronting the erosion of his ideals and the physical toll of years spent resisting authority. His reputation precedes him, but it no longer protects him. The film frames heroism as something fragile, easily distorted by memory and storytelling, and asks what remains when the stories told about a man no longer match who he has become. This approach aligns closely with the project's title, which signals finality, not as spectacle, but as inevitability. Produced by A24, the film reflects the studio's continued interest in reinterpreting established mythology through intimate, character-focused lenses. Violence, when it appears, is expected to carry weight rather than thrill, reinforcing the idea that rebellion is rarely clean and never free. Authority and resistance are treated not as moral absolutes, but as forces that leave scars on both sides. The Death of Robin Hood is not a story about reclaiming glory or restoring balance. It is about legacy, how legends are constructed, how they decay, and what happens when the man behind the myth is finally forced to live without it. In stripping Robin Hood of romantic certainty, the film aims to confront the cost of believing in heroes long after their time has passed. Following a decade of evolution from video game icon to cinematic hero, Sonic the Hedgehog 4 continues the Paramount franchise that began with Sonic the Hedgehog 2020, followed by Sonic the Hedgehog 2 2022, and Sonic the Hedgehog 3 December 2024. Officially announced for a March 19, 2027 theatrical release, the film marks the next chapter in a series that has collectively grossed over $1 billion worldwide, cementing Sonic's place as a cross-generational phenomenon. The story is expected to expand the Sonic cinematic universe while maintaining the core balance between high-speed spectacle and emotional stakes. Sonic, voiced by Ben Schwartz, continues to navigate a world where friendship, loyalty, and responsibility are as essential as speed. Allies such as Tails and Knuckles, along with returning adversaries like Dr. Evo, Eggman, Robotnik, are set to shape the narrative, though the full cast has yet to be officially confirmed. The franchise's trajectory suggests that relationships, personal growth, and the consequences of past battles will play a central role alongside the action sequences audiences expect. While details of the plot remain under wraps, Sonic 4 is anticipated to explore the evolving responsibilities of a hero whose actions have far-reaching effects. The film is expected to emphasize themes of legacy, identity, and purpose, asking what it means to protect a world that grows increasingly complex with each challenge. The balance between humor, heart, and heroics, which has defined previous entries, will remain central, ensuring that the franchise continues to appeal to both longtime fans and new audiences. More than a continuation of high-octane adventure, Sonic the Hedgehog 4 aims to deepen the cinematic universe, showing that the stakes for a hero are not measured in speed alone, but in the choices made, the lives affected, and the lasting impact of every battle fought in the pursuit of justice, friendship, and belonging. Minions 3 arrives as the latest chapter in one of the most enduring and unexpectedly influential animated film franchises of the 21st century, set to open in theaters on July 1, 2026 in the United States under the banner of Illumination and Universal Pictures. This third standalone outing for the mischievous Yellow Henchman marks the 7th overall film in the Despicable Me universe, joining Minions: The Rise of Gru 2022 and the mainline Despicable Me saga that began in 2010. Directed by Pierre Coffin, the co-creator and voice of the Minions since their first appearance, and written by Brian Lynch, whose work includes both Minions and other Illumination projects, Minions 3 is poised to expand the franchise's blend of visual invention, slapstick humor, and character-driven absurdity. Coffin's return behind the camera, alongside producer Chris Meledandri, founder of Illumination, and Bill Ryan, reinforces this film's commitment to preserving the distinct comedic sensibility that has made the Minions cultural icons while exploring new narrative territory. Scheduled for a summer 2026 release, the film occupies a prime holiday season slot typically associated with major animated tentpoles. This positioning reflects both the commercial confidence Universal has placed in the franchise and the way the Minions have become box office anchors, contributing to the Despicable Me film's collective global gross that now exceeds several $1 billion. While official plot details remain under wraps, Minions 3 is expected to continue the franchise's exploration of its core themes: loyalty amid chaos, the absurd consequences of unchecked enthusiasm, and the idea that even the smallest, most chaotic figures can have an outsized impact on the world around them. The Minions themselves, linguistically indecipherable yet universally expressive, serve as both comic relief and emotional center, challenging traditional notions of narrative coherence in family films by making mischief and miscommunication central to their appeal. In an era defined by ever-expanding cinematic universes, Minions 3 stands apart not because it seeks to reinvent the wheel, but because it tests the durability of joy itself, asking quietly and without fanfare whether laughter can sustain meaning when stories become traditions and characters transcend their origins. Every legend reaches a moment where it must answer for its past. Which of these stories do you believe will leave a mark, and which will fade into myth? Comment your most anticipated film, like the video, and subscribe for deeper cinematic breakdowns you won't find anywhere else. See ya!